Well, hey there. Have you ever had a time where you knew you absolutely loved your spouse and that you were completely devoted to your spouse, but just didn't like them? Have you ever had those times? Well, today I'm going to introduce you to an author who's written a fantastic book about those times and about how to get over them. So let's get on with the show. Well, hello there. My name is Everett O'Keefe, and I am the founder of Ignite Press. And I'm excited today to bring you a book launch livecast. I've got a special author with us today who has a special story to share about love and about forgiveness. And I don't think you're going to want to miss it. Before we get there, let me tell you a little bit about Ignite Press. We are a hybrid publisher, and we specialize in helping people bring their message to the world. So if you have a book that you've written, a story that you've created, a message that you want to get out to the world, you can reach us through our website and we can talk about your book and how to proceed with getting that out to the world. But today I've got a special book. And it is launching today, and you can get it on special today as well. Jim Lusk, the author, is a devoted Christian with a passion to help other men in their marriages through the guiding power of God's word. And after reflecting deeply on his own marital challenges and closely analyzing key biblical scriptures, Jim uncovered profound insights on how to restore his marriage. And this is what we want to talk about today. So, Jim, why don't you come on in here? How are you doing today? Congratulations on your book launch.
Thank you, Everett. I'm doing good today.
This is a pretty exciting day. This is your first book, am I correct?
This is my first book. Yes.
Okay, fantastic. And it turned out beautifully. You can pick this up. Everyone can pick this up on Amazon, and the Kindle is on a special launch price today of 99 cents, I believe. Now, Jim, before we dive into your book, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I'm a guy that spent most of his life fixing stuff for a living and got to the point where I couldn't just fix my marriage. Donna and I have been married now about 41 and a half years. We've known each other about a year longer than that. And we've navigated many challenges. We've raised two sons who are now married with two kids of their own each. That's basically us in a nutshell.
All right. Now, you brought up a struggle that I think all people face. Times where they're living with their spouse that they absolutely love, but maybe have some moments where they don't really like them. I'm sure that I'm sure that's a struggle that everybody goes through at some time. Tell us a bit about your story and some of the struggles that you guys have had, because you guys have had some pretty unique challenges.
I went through a long period of time of indifference, during which time Donna was suffering from pretty severe depression. And I've come to find out in talking with other people, they've dealt with some of the same things. As Christians, we don't talk about depression much. We kind of want to sweep it under the rug because, well, we're Christians. We shouldn't be depressed. But there are some chemical things and some other things that will put you in that place. And I was ill prepared to deal with Donna's depression. And in many ways, I was ill prepared to just deal with the normal challenges of marriage. And that's what brought me to the point where God spoke to me. And one of the first things, I did field service fixing equipment. I was between service calls and I distinctly heard God whisper to me, I made too much happen for you two to meet on that day at that time for you to throw it away. And that started me on the journey to discovering the things I needed to discover.
Now, you guys have had really quite the journey. And I'm glad you brought up what you did, what you said about depression. It seems like, and I get this, but there's a lot of people in churches and things like that that'll be like, oh, well, you're only depressed because you're not accepting the promises that God has made, has given you, or you're only depressed because your faith is not great enough, and therefore, you need to pray more and get right with God. That's why you're depressed.
We have heard that more times than I can count.
Yeah. And I understand why some people feel that way, but at the same time, like you mentioned, there are chemical imbalances that appear in our brains, and whether you're a fan of medications or not, there's a reason that some of those medications work, right? Is because there is a chemical imbalance. But your story, you guys have dealt with some real challenges, but share with us where did you come to this point? There must have been a point where there was a shift when you realized, okay, I'm looking at this incorrectly, and there's something I can do as a husband. Describe that for us.
Well, it was basically that day where I heard God whisper to me that our meeting was very unique. We should have met 4 years earlier at a Youth for Christ event when I was hanging out with Donna's friends, but we didn't meet that weekend because it wasn't the right time. And another thing that God whispered to me, Donna is one that keeps score, but she more keeps a negative score on herself than on me. And I just heard God say to me, which is absolutely true, that the good times have so far outweighed the bad. It's not even close. We have had so many good times, even in the middle of Donna's depression. And I started to focus on those, and it slowly, my heart softened and it turned. And so I had to find out more.
Okay. You're, I was going to talk about, you came up to this title for the book, Your Closest Neighbor. And it's funny because when you first brought it up, my mind didn't go where it needed to go. But tell us about Your Closest Neighbor and why the book is called Your Closest Neighbor.
Well, it started with sitting in church one day, and I have no idea what the sermon was about, but brought up love your neighbor as yourself. And again, God whispered in my ear, who's your closest neighbor? Well, it's not the guy next door, it's my wife. And I didn't have a title. I just had a working title for a while. And I'd gone to run an errand somewhere, and there God gave me the title. And because I was not in a place where I could write it down, I called Donna. I said, write this down. I said, your closest neighbor. And she did. And it's because we don't think of our spouse as our neighbor. We think of, the person we can close the door on that's next door. But our spouse is our closest neighbor, and then our kids are our parents are our next closest neighbors.
Well, and God calls us to love our neighbors, and
yes.
It's obviously it's important enough that it's one of the 10 commandments. So it certainly makes sense that we apply it. Have you ever found a time, Jim, where you came to a realization that did you ever find a time where you found you were treating strangers better than your spouse? You ever
Oh
have
yeah.
any of those situations?
Oh yeah. Because one of the things about sharing space with somebody is they're going to do something that's going to irritate you. It's just the nature of being human. If that's the person you work with, you get to go home and leave work at work. But as you share a home with somebody, those irritants are going to come up, and you have to learn that they're not the big deal.
Yeah, it's funny how our tolerance level is so different. It's like I guess it's because maybe we have to keep up this facade when we're out in the world, that we're controlled, that we're in good spirits, that everything's fine, all of that. And then when we come home, we no longer feel the need to keep up that facade, and sometimes that means we just unload right on our
Mm-hmm.
spouses. And other times it probably means that we just have a stupid short fuse,
Yep.
and the long fuse that we might present to our coworkers, our clients, our other people in church, complete strangers, people we have no relationships with whatsoever. We'll have this really long patient fuse, and then we come home and our fuse is gone. It's all burned
Yep.
away. There is no fuse,
Yep.
right? And this is where I think one of the real important values of your book is, reinforcing that, we are to love our neighbors, and we are to love our spouses as our neighbors. And what neighbor, what neighbor do we know better? And what neighbor really are we more beholden to? In fact, promised to.
Yes.
Where many of us, it's we have oaths, we have that we've pledges that we've made in our wedding ceremonies. So absolutely. Now I saw a question here from Zelda, and I was going to bring this up for you. And she says, can you elaborate on the specific handbook elements or the practical tips that readers can find in your book, things that people can apply to their own lives?
Well, to begin with, as I was writing the book, uh, the first deal I knew I had to address was forgiveness. And the biggest thing I had to forgive Donna for was not being perfect. But then as I got through, I got to where Paul says, husbands, love your wives the way Christ loved the church. And for the first time in my life, I've been a Christian since I was 14. I'm 64 now. For the first time in all those years, I asked myself what that looked like. Practically, what did it look like? It's like it's a nice saying, but we have to go deeper into it. And I said, okay, let's go see what Jesus had to say. And Matthew 11:28, he said, come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest. And I thought, oh, that's big. Do I give my wife rest?
Mm.
And that's all of chapter 3 is devoted to that subject, because to me, it's that important. We go out and battle the world all day long. We come home to somebody that's giving us rest. And then chapter 4 is other ways that Christ loves the church, and applying how we would apply that to our spouse.
I want to come back, because what you just said about rest is really poignant, but I want to come back to that first part, forgiveness. It's funny. I think that very often, right, we can get very critical of our spouses. And I don't know about you, I find myself getting critical of my spouse if she gets critical of me. If she gets critical of me, I get critical of her. And of course, this is this never ending circular
Right.
that just drives, couples to abstraction. But you said forgiving your spouse because your spouse isn't perfect. Tell me about that. Tell me about where you came to that, because I think many people would, may misinterpret that, and I think there's an important lesson there.
Well, we know as a human that nobody's perfect. But on some level, we all have an expectation that our spouse will treat us perfectly. And that's just not going to happen. We all have flaws, but as I realized, I was expecting perfection out of Donna in certain areas, and she's not capable of that. I'm not capable of it. She never did anything really bad to me. She never hurt me in the ways a lot of spouses can hurt somebody, but I needed to forgive her for not treating me the way I expected all the time.
And I think that's the part that's so interesting, because I think of, I need to forgive my spouse for this action that they
Right.
performed. When that is so small picture. And instead forgiving your spouse for not being perfect, because you're right, we do tend to want to hold them to the standard, that they're going to be perfect, they're going to treat us perfectly, and therefore everything will be hunky-dory, and that's just not the case. I think that's really a valuable lesson. It's almost like saying, hey, you know what, it's okay, you're not perfect. And of course that sounds so egotistical, by the way, to say that, right? To say, hey, it's okay, you're not perfect, as if I am, or something like that. But I think that is absolutely key, because if we can realize that we're all broken, and that we will be imperfect, our expectations are a lot easier to satisfy.
Yep.
In that process. Okay, so you talked about forgiveness, and you talked about rest, and asking, do we give our spouses rest? And I don't think most people think about that either.
No, they don't. And actually, Donna and I had a discussion as I was in the middle of writing that chapter about rest. And while there may be other types of rest, we came up with 3: spiritual, emotional, and physical. And oftentimes, the spiritual and emotional rest is physically exhausting. Getting out and doing a hike in the mountains is exhausting, but it can be that spiritual and emotional rest. It's the getting out and breathing the fresh air. And sometimes sitting at home, there's all these things you need to do, but when you're out somewhere, there's that sigh of relief. There's that rest that you get that you don't get anywhere else. And oftentimes the physical rest is, hey, just sit and rest. Had father, some friends of mine years ago, when he came home from work, this was when they still had an afternoon newspaper, he would sit in his chair and read the newspaper. That was his form of rest when he got home.
Yeah. Everyone's got their own form of rest, and I think that what a joy it would be for us to surprise our spouses with, like a break from the normal routine, and to say, hey, actually, you know what? Let me take care of that. You go, you do whatever because everyone's got a different way of rest, right? Some people it's reading a book, or watching TV, or it's gardening, or it's social media. I don't know, whatever. Everyone's got their own thing, and equipping your spouse with that sounds absolutely critical. Now, in the last chapter of your book, you break down Corinthians 13, and the definition of love, and you actually go really pretty deeply into this. What made you decide to use that?
Well, here again, we're talking about love your neighbor as yourself. And again, what does that look like? So 1 Corinthians 13 is really the place to go. And here again, I've heard this almost my whole life, but I never thought about what do the words mean. So I looked up the definition of the word patient. We know what it means, but we don't know what it means. And love is patient. And then love is kind. The world loves kindness, but are we kind? And then I got to the bottom of, I went through separately each of the love is and love isn't, or love doesn't. And I got to the bottom and I had another revelation. Love your neighbor as yourself. Well, guess what? You're supposed to love yourself the same way. You're supposed to be patient with yourself, kind with yourself. And that is often harder than treating your spouse that way. I know it is with Donna. And, you know, the big one for me and the one that I think really needs to hit home with people is love keeps no record of wrongs. We need to take that to heart, because that's it seems like, you know, every argument couples have, stuff from the past gets brought up, and that's never helpful.
Yeah. You remind me of how many times we can take the smallest thing and blow it up to be the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm.
You talked early on in this interview about how Donna, you know, would keep a record, but it was a record of her own wrongs or failings or things like that. And it's so interesting how different we all can be, right? Some people are going to keep a record of the spouse's wrongs rather than their own wrongs. I think that's very common. But other people need to be forgiving, not just of their spouses, but also of themselves in the process. Well, so Jim, your book, who'd you write your book for? Who'd you have in mind when you wrote this book?
Well, the primary audience is men, but women will get quite a bit out of it too, as long as they don't look at their husband and say, you need to read this. And
which by the way that's not false, right? The husband does need to read it.
Needs to read it.
But husbands rarely respond well with, hey, you need to read this, and then go right out and read it, right?
Right. But one of the points I make is that while husbands are supposed to love their wives the way Christ loves the church, we're all supposed to be Christ-like. So that means we all need to behave in that manner, husbands and wives.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, let me put this back up here. I just want to remind everybody the book is available right now. You can pick it up on Amazon, where the paperback is for sale, and the Kindle is actually on sale at 99 cents. And that will be for just another day or so. But please pick that up. And by the way, if you've never read a Kindle book, or Kindle's not your thing, two things. First, you have a Kindle reader on every smartphone, on every tablet, and it's also available. There are readers available on Mac and PC. And it's a very convenient format. But of course, the paperback is there available for you as well. But this would be a really great book to get as a gift. I think that, quite frankly, anybody in a marriage relationship would benefit from this book, male or female. I think that the wisdom is profound and useful. So let me go back here. There we are. So Jim, is there anything else that you'd like to share before we sign off on this live cast?
Well, this has been kind of the culmination of a lot of years of life and a few years of work to put the book together. And I truly feel like God led me to write the things I wrote. And we want marriages to be changed through this. We want people to view their marriage as something to fight for.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is a battle, right? It's a battle that we wage sometimes with each other and other times with the world. And it is a battle. Well, Jim, congratulations on your book. I know that it has been a labor of love, and you guys have seen the battle through. I'm excited to see this out in the world, and I'm going to be excited, Jim, to hear the stories of the lives that have been impacted by your book, or the marriages that will be impacted. Jim, lastly, if people want to reach you, do you have a way that you'd like them to reach out to you? I know you've got a website under construction. We can put that in here if we want.
Website's under construction. James Lusk at yourclosestneighbor.com with hyphens between the words.
Say that again.
James Lusk.
Hyphen Lusk.
No.
Nope.
No hyphen in the name.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just hyphen in the website.
Oh, gotcha. So go ahead and give it to me again then. Sorry.
James Lusk.
Yep.
At your hyphen closest hyphen neighbor.
Got it. All right. .com.
Yeah. And I can also be reached on Facebook at James Allen Lusk.
Excellent. All right. Well, Jim, thank you so much, and congratulations on the book and the book launch.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us here today for this book launch livecast. If you have a book in mind, if you've been writing a book that you would like to get out there to build your brand, support your organization, or get out your message, then reach out to ignitepress.us. You can go to our website at ignitepress.us, where you can schedule a consultation with me. And then, of course, don't forget to pick up Jim's book on Kindle or paperback at Amazon. So thank you so much for joining us today for another book launch livecast.